My name is Margaret Holloway, and I am 70 years old. I have lived in the quiet town of Ridgewood Springs for most of my life, in the same weathered house where I raised my only son, before illness took him from me far too soon. After his passing, I told myself I would keep this home standing for the sake of the only family I still had left, my daughter-in-law, Vanessa, and my grandson, Caleb. Caleb, now 20, is the reason I kept moving even when grief felt heavier than my own bones. He is Vanessa's biological son, and from the day my boy died, I knew Caleb deserved stability. That is why I allowed Vanessa to stay with me, even when her footsteps grew colder, her smile became thinner, and her eyes started carrying shadows that didn't belong to widowhood. Life wasn't easy after my son died, but I stretched my pension, held the house together, and tried to give Caleb the kind of peace every young man deserves. For years, I told myself Vanessa was simply struggling, trying to find her way, but deep inside, I felt something shifting, something that made the air in this house feel heavier each passing month. And then came the morning when everything began to unravel. I was folding Caleb's neatly pressed school shirts on the edge of my bed when a sudden heavy thump rose from the floor above. The sound traveled through the quiet house like something sharp striking old wood. A chill went through me. At 70, instincts become sharper than eyesight. Something was wrong. I set the shirt aside and climbed the narrow staircase, each step creaking beneath my weight. At the top, Vanessa's bedroom door was wide open. She was bent over her bed, pulling a large suitcase toward herself, tossing clothes inside in a frantic, uneven rush. No folding, no order, just grabbing whatever she could reach. Her work tablet glowed on the unmade bed beside her, several windows still open, as if she'd been reading something she didn't want anyone else to see. That was the moment the world I had protected for years finally cracked. I stood in Vanessa's doorway longer than I should have, trying to understand what I was really looking at. A suitcase half open. Clothes shoved inside without care. A woman who hadn't spoken more than a few polite sentences to me in weeks, now suddenly packing like someone being chased by their own secrets. "Vanessa, what's going on?" I asked quietly. She didn't look up. Didn't flinch. Didn't stop. "It's nothing, Margaret. Just sorting things," she muttered, stuffing another handful of clothes into the bag. But her hands were shaking. Her eyes kept darting toward the glowing tablet on the bed, as if she was afraid I'd seen something I shouldn't. I wanted to question her, push harder, but Caleb's voice from downstairs interrupted everything. "Grandma, can you come here a second?" I turned away from Vanessa and walked back down the stairs, one careful step at a time. My heart felt heavy, and a dull ache started in my chest, the kind of ache a mother feels when she senses the earth shifting under her family. Caleb was standing in the living room, holding my worn leather wallet in his hands. His brow was furrowed in a way I had seen only once before, when he got the call that his mother had missed another one of his school events without explanation. "Grandma, did you know your account only has $15 left?" I felt the world tilt. "What?" My voice cracked. That can't be right, Caleb. I had savings. I had enough for bills for at least the next 2 months. "I checked carefully," he said softly. "Your balance is $15. Exactly 15. My legs weakened, and I lowered myself slowly onto the couch. $15. Decades of careful saving, budgeting, stretching my small pension. Gone. Caleb sat beside me, his tone changing, growing steady, focused, alert. I had seen that expression on his face when he helped neighbors fix their hacked accounts or troubleshoot software issues at school. "Grandma," he said, "I think something happened. Something intentional." My throat tightened. "What are you suggesting?" He hesitated, and then spoke the words that cracked the last bit of comfort in my chest. "I think Mom took your money." For a moment, I could not breathe. Not because I was shocked Vanessa was capable of something selfish. but because I realized how long I had ignored the signs. The late-night messages. The sudden new clothes. The phone calls she took outside. The coldness that grew each month. And the quiet guilt I sometimes saw in Caleb's eyes when he watched her. I felt tears heat my eyes, but I steadied my voice. How do you know? Caleb reached into his backpack and pulled out a small folder. Inside were printouts, bank statements, transaction logs, and unfamiliar account numbers. This started months ago, he explained. Transfers. Withdrawals you never authorized. Someone used your identity to open loans too. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. I stared at the papers with trembling hands. Dates. Amounts. Signature lines forged with my name. Identity theft. By the woman I kept under my roof out of love for my son. How long has this been happening? I whispered. Caleb looked at me with a mixture of sadness and something much sharper. Longer than you think. A lump formed in my throat. I steadied myself against the arm of the couch, feeling the weight of betrayal settle on my shoulders like a cold, wet cloth. Down the hallway, I heard footsteps. Vanessa coming downstairs, suitcase wheels brushing lightly against the walls. Caleb didn't look at her. He didn't even flinch. He leaned closer to me and whispered, his voice calm. Almost chillingly calm. Grandma, I'm not done yet. I'm going to find everything. And in that moment, I realized. My quiet, gentle grandson was about to uncover a truth far uglier than either of us imagined. That night, long after Vanessa shut herself in her room and the house fell quiet, I found myself lying awake, staring at the faint cracks in the ceiling. The idea that my own daughter-in-law had drained my life savings. It felt unreal, too sharp to touch and too heavy to carry. But denial was a luxury I no longer had. Near midnight, I heard the faint tapping of computer keys from Caleb's room. Steady. Focused. Relentless. I pushed aside my blanket, put on my robe, and walked down the hallway. Light seeped from under his door. I knocked gently. Caleb? It's late. Come in, Grandma. I stepped inside, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe. His desk was covered with papers, bank logs, credit reports, unfamiliar account statements, and what looked like screenshots of emails. His laptop displayed multiple windows at once, lines of data scrolling faster than my aging eyes could follow. Caleb, what is all this? He didn't look tired. He didn't look stressed. He looked determined. I told you, he said calmly. I'm going to find everything. He clicked a window, and suddenly I recognized the email layout on the screen, Vanessa's. My heart stuttered. You got into her email? He nodded. She uses the same password for everything. It wasn't hard. I felt both fear and awe mix inside me. What did you find? He lifted a stack of printouts and handed them to me. The text blurred for a moment as my hands began to shake. These accounts, Caleb said, pointing to unfamiliar bank names, were opened using your identity. Fake signatures. Fake financial profiles. She didn't just drain your savings, she borrowed money in your name. I pressed a trembling hand to my forehead. How could she? Why would she? It gets worse, he said quietly. I looked up at him, and the seriousness in his eyes sent a chill down my spine. She's not working late like she told us. She's been meeting someone. His name is Adrian Price. He works at a firm called Harbor Point Wealth Management Group. I stared at him in disbelief. She's seeing another man? Caleb clicked another tab. A social media profile opened. Adrian's smiling face stared back at us. Professional photos. Office shots. Travel pictures. And comments Vanessa had left under them. She and Adrian have been moving money together, Caleb continued. Not just yours. Look at this. He spread more papers across the desk. Names I didn't know. Ages. Account numbers. These are older clients Adrian manages. Vanessa helped him access their retirement funds. They've been siphoning money for months. I felt my breath leave me. Dear God. Caleb's jaw tightened. They're planning to disappear. New state. New accounts. New life. They've been preparing everything behind our backs. I sank into the chair beside him, feeling the room spin slowly. My own daughter-in-law, stealing from elderly people, from me, from her own home. Caleb reached over and gently placed his hand on mine. Grandma, I won't let her get away with it. I swallowed hard. What can we even do? This is too big for us. He shook his head slowly. No, not for me. He turned back to his laptop, opened a folder labeled evidence, and inside were dozens of files. Screenshots, email threads, transfer logs, fraudulent documents signed with my name, communications between Vanessa and Adrian, plans to relocate. He had captured everything. How did you learn all this? I whispered. He finally looked at me with a faint, sad smile. Grandma, the same way they learned to steal. I learned to catch them. A shiver moved through me. My gentle grandson, my boy who once collected toy robots and spent afternoons fixing old radios, was now peeling back the layers of a crime ring that could destroy dozens of lives. And this is only the beginning, Caleb said, organizing the papers with a calmness that frightened me. Tomorrow, I'll take the next steps. I already know who to contact. I felt tears sting my eyes, not just from betrayal, but from pride so fierce it nearly overwhelmed me. Caleb, you shouldn't have to carry this. His eyes softened. I'm not carrying it alone, Grandma. I'm carrying it for us. Just then, down the hallway, Vanessa's bedroom door squeaked open faintly, her footsteps shifting on the old wooden floor. Caleb clicked his laptop closed in one smooth motion. He leaned toward me and whispered, "She won't know anything. Not yet." And in that dimly lit room, with papers of financial ruin spread around us, I realized something. The truth had only just started to surface, and the storm it would unleash was far bigger than anything I imagined. The next morning, sunlight filtered weakly through the kitchen curtains as I stood at the counter, trying to steady my hands long enough to pour myself a cup of tea. Sleep hadn't come. My mind kept circling the same impossible thought. Vanessa wasn't just stealing. She was planning to leave us entirely. Caleb entered the kitchen, already dressed, his expression composed in a way that didn't fit a 20-year-old. He sat across from me, opened his laptop, and spoke in the same even tone he'd used the night before. "Grandma," he said, turning the screen toward me, "you need to see the rest." On the display was a collection of messages, private conversations between Vanessa and Adrian. My breath hitched as I skimmed the words. Vanessa. I'm almost done moving the last of the funds. Just need a few more days. Adrian. Good. As soon as you're ready, we'll leave Ridgewood Springs. I already found places in Clearwater and Asheville. Vanessa. I can't stay in this house much longer. Margaret is asking too many questions. I felt my stomach twist painfully. Caleb scrolled further. There were voice note transcripts, vacation searches, rental applications, all using different last names. New identities, Caleb said quietly. Fake profiles. They planned everything. I pressed a hand against my heart. So she was really going to leave? And take money that wasn't hers? Money belonging to elderly people. And yours, Caleb added firmly. Everything they stole was meant to fund their escape. Just then, footsteps echoed down the hall. Vanessa entered the kitchen, her face drawn tight, eyes hollow but watchful. She didn't greet us. She didn't ask about breakfast. She simply grabbed her keys, muttered something about running errands, and walked out. The silence she left behind felt colder than the morning air. Caleb waited until the front door clicked shut before speaking again. "She's meeting Adrian," he said. Their messages last night were about finalizing the move. He pulled out a printed document, a list of wire transfers leading to a hidden account that didn't belong to Vanessa or Adrian on paper. But Caleb had traced it anyway. They used a layered route, he explained. Transferred stolen money through small accounts to hide the trail. But they made mistakes. She used your personal information twice. That made everything unravel. I stared at the papers, overwhelmed by the scale of betrayal. How much did they steal? From you? Everything you had. From Adrian's clients? Tens of thousands. Maybe more. I'm still calculating exact numbers. I pressed my trembling hands together. And she didn't care that I raised her child, I whispered. She didn't care that I kept a roof over their heads after my son died. Caleb looked at me with soft eyes, but his voice remained steady. Grandma, some people only see opportunities, not people, not family. He clicked to another folder labeled Travel. There, laid out in neat lines, were Vanessa and Adrian's planned bus routes, hotel reservations, even an apartment application in another state under assumed identities. They were planning to leave this week, he said quietly. You were never supposed to know. A deep ache settled in my chest, one part sorrow, one part humiliation, and one part growing resolve. What do we do now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Caleb sat up a little straighter, and in his expression I saw something new. Not anger. Not fear. Leadership. Now, he said. Now I expose them. Before I could speak, he continued. Today, I'll file fraud alerts with every bank. I'll report identity theft. I'll send anonymous packets to every elderly client Adrian stole from, so they can protect themselves. And I'll notify Harbor Point Wealth Management Group. I stared at him, stunned. You're taking on everything alone. He shook his head. No, Grandma. I'm doing this for us. For Dad. For every person they hurt. A quiet resolve settled into him like an anchor. When they fall, he whispered, they'll fall hard. At that moment, the front door opened again. Vanessa stepped inside, her expression tense, her eyes flicking between us, almost as if she sensed something shifting underfoot. But Caleb didn't hide the laptop this time. He didn't move the papers. He simply watched her with a gaze as calm as still water. The storm she never expected had already begun. Vanessa spent the rest of the morning pacing through the house, moving from room to room like a restless ghost. She didn't speak to me. She didn't speak to Caleb. She only kept checking her phone, screen lighting up with messages she tried to hide, her fingers trembling slightly each time she typed a reply. Caleb didn't confront her. He didn't need to. He had already moved far ahead of her. By afternoon, he sat at the dining table surrounded by neatly organized stacks of papers. Every document, every fraudulent signature, every stolen dollar lined up with the precision of a courtroom exhibit. His laptop hummed softly as he typed, eyes focused, jaw set. I approached him slowly. Caleb, what are you doing now? He didn't look up. Everything, he replied. I'm filing the reports. Sending alerts. Freezing accounts. Protecting every victim I found. His fingers moved with the confidence of someone twice his age. First, he submitted fraud alerts to every bank touched by Vanessa and Adrian. Then he sent identity theft complaints using the evidence he had gathered, each form with attached screenshots, each report backed by undeniable proof. Next, he wrote an anonymous, detailed email to the State Financial Crime Task Force, attaching dozens of files and a clear timeline of the stolen funds. Then he moved to the affected elderly clients. He slipped printed packets into envelopes, documents explaining where their money had gone, how it had been stolen, and step-by-step instructions on protecting their accounts. Each envelope bore no return address, only a typewritten label. "They'll know the truth by tomorrow," he said quietly. "Every one of them." I felt my eyes sting with tears. "Caleb, this is too much for you. This is work for people who care," he interrupted gently. "Grandma, nobody else knew. Nobody else was watching. So I had to." Something in his voice, so calm, so heartbreakingly firm, made me realize how deeply he had been carrying this burden long before I saw the cracks. "What about Harbor Point?" I asked. He opened another email draft. "I'm sending them the internal evidence now. Adrian won't keep his job past today." A chill passed through me. "Will they know you did this?" "No," he said, sealing another envelope. "Everything is anonymous. They'll only see the truth." I looked toward Vanessa's closed bedroom door, where faint muffled talking could still be heard. She was whispering intensely, likely to Adrian, completely unaware that her carefully built escape plan was collapsing in real time. Caleb paused, scanning yet another set of bank logs. "She thinks she's leaving this town with stolen money," he murmured. "She thinks she's hurting strangers. But she hurt you." His voice turned quiet, almost dangerous. "And I promised myself I would never let anyone hurt you again." I touched his shoulder gently. "Caleb, please, don't let this consume you." He exhaled and met my eyes. "It won't. Because it's almost over." A notification chimed sharply from his laptop. He opened it, read quickly, then leaned back with a slow, controlled breath. "That was the first one," he said. "The first what?" "Bank freeze confirmation. Vanessa's main account is locked." My heart pounded. "Already?" He nodded. "This is only the beginning." Within minutes, more notifications began appearing. Account flagged. Transfer denied. Suspicious activity under review. Access temporarily suspended. Each alert pulled another thread from Vanessa and Adrian's plans. And then, a louder chime. A different tone. Caleb clicked the message. A small smile lifted one corner of his mouth. "That was Harbor Point." "What did they say?" "They've opened an internal investigation into Adrian." His tone hardened. "They're calling him in today." Vanessa walked past the dining room just then, her heels tapping anxiously on the wooden floor. She shot a quick glance at Caleb's papers, but he covered nothing. He simply watched her move with a calmness that made my stomach tighten. She paused in the doorway, sensing something she couldn't name, then quickly turned away and headed to the front door. When it closed behind her, the house fell into a strange, electric silence. Caleb exhaled, closed his laptop, and looked at me with steady, unblinking eyes. "It has started," he said. And I knew he wasn't talking about paperwork. He meant the collapse. Vanessa and Adrian's fall had officially begun. And there was no turning it back. The next 48 hours moved like a storm rolling through our lives. Slow at first, then ruthless, loud, and impossible to stop. Vanessa returned home late that evening, her face pale and drawn tight, her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. She didn't eat. She didn't speak. She paced the living room, eyes flashing toward the windows every time a car passed by outside. She could feel something closing in on her. She just didn't know what. Caleb sat quietly at the dining table, sipping tea, watching her with the calm expression of someone who already knew how this story ended. The next morning, it began. A loud knock shook the front door. Vanessa froze mid-step. Caleb and I exchanged a look. She opened the door slowly. Two sharply dressed investigators stood on the porch, badges visible, faces unreadable. "Miss Holloway?" one of them asked. Vanessa swallowed hard. "Yes. We're from the State Financial Crime Task Force. We need to ask you a few questions regarding suspicious activity connected to Harbor Point Wealth Management Group." The color drained from her face. I don't understand." One investigator's tone remained polite, but firm. "We'd appreciate your cooperation. It appears your financial records intersect with an ongoing case." Caleb remained silent, hands folded neatly in his lap, as if watching a predictable scene unfold. Vanessa stammered something about needing a lawyer, then closed the door on them abruptly and stumbled into the kitchen. Her hands shook so violently she dropped her phone on the floor. Within hours, everything unraveled further. Harbor Point suspended Adrian Price pending investigation. Caleb learned this when an internal memo leaked online. Anonymous tip, of course. One he himself had triggered. Vanessa disappeared into her room and stayed there until nightfall. When she came out, her face was streaked with makeup and panic, her suitcase now zipped and standing upright beside her bedroom door. She was preparing to run. But she was already too late. The following day, Caleb checked his laptop and quietly announced the next blow. "Adrian's accounts are frozen," he said softly. "All of them." Vanessa was on the couch when she heard it. She looked at him sharply, but said nothing. That afternoon, another knock. This time, it wasn't investigators. It was police. "Is Adrian Price connected to this residence?" one officer asked. Vanessa's voice cracked. No, he doesn't. He was never." Caleb interrupted, his tone polite and neutral. "He's my mother's financial associate." Vanessa's head snapped toward him, horror widening her eyes. The officer nodded slowly. "Thank you. He was taken into custody this morning. We're continuing interviews regarding extended financial misconduct and identity theft. If either of you has information, you may contact us." Vanessa sagged against the wall as the officers left. Adrian was arrested. Her partner in crime, gone. Caleb returned to his laptop, typing calmly as if none of this chaos touched him. Vanessa finally broke. She stormed into the dining room, pointing a shaking finger at Caleb. "What did you do?" she demanded. "What did you tell them? Why are they asking about me? About Adrian?" Caleb didn't raise his voice. He didn't flinch. He simply closed his laptop and said, "Mom, everything that's happening is because of what you did." Her face twisted. How dare you, after everything I've done for you?" He looked at her with a sadness I couldn't bear to see. "You betrayed Grandma. You betrayed Dad's memory. And you betrayed every elderly person whose money you stole." Vanessa's lips trembled as she stepped back, as if struck. Her phone buzzed suddenly. She glanced at it, and turned white as paper. A news alert. Visible even from where I sat. Harbor Point advisor arrested on suspicion of embezzlement and elder financial abuse. Adrian's photograph sat right under the headline. Her whole body swayed. She sank into the chair, covering her mouth with both hands. That night, she barely slept. She kept checking the windows, pacing hallways, muttering to herself, calling numbers that never picked up. By dawn, her fate was already sealed. When another knock sounded, firmer, colder, I didn't need to ask who it was. Police officers entered the house with legal documents in hand. "Ms. Vanessa Holloway, you are under arrest for identity theft, wire fraud, and involvement in a financial elder abuse scheme." Her scream echoed through the house. "No. You don't understand. I was going to fix everything. Adrian told me, he said, "Caleb, please, stop them, please." But Caleb stood still. Unmoving. Eyes calm. Expression unreadable. As they handcuffed her, she twisted toward him desperately. "Caleb, baby, please, tell them I didn't mean to, tell them." He looked at her for a long moment, then spoke softly. "You meant every choice you made." And that was the last thing she heard before they took her away. My home, after the door closed behind her, felt painfully silent. Like the moment after a storm when destruction becomes clear. But Caleb exhaled gently and said, "It's over, Grandma. The worst part is over." Except it wasn't. Not completely. There was still the matter of justice. And the long road to rebuilding what she had tried to destroy. The days after Vanessa's arrest felt unreal, like someone had turned my quiet, familiar life into a courtroom drama I never asked to be part of. The house was still. Too still. Her shoes were still by the doorway, her coffee mug still on the counter, her perfume faintly lingering in the hallway. But she wasn't there. And for the first time, I realized how long I had been walking on eggshells without noticing. Caleb handled everything with a calmness beyond his years. He sat at the dining table with stacks of printed reports, flash drives, and neatly labeled folders. Evidence he had spent months collecting in absolute silence. I watched him work, my hands trembling around my tea, unable to believe my own grandson had carried such a burden alone. "Are you sure you're doing okay?" I asked him gently. He gave me a faint smile. "I'm doing what I need to do." 2 days later, everything moved quickly. Adrian Price faced his first hearing, and the charges read aloud in court were enough to make the room gasp: financial elder abuse, identity theft, wire fraud, retirement funds embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud. Every word felt like a direct attack on the people he had stolen from. Not just numbers or accounts, but lives, dignity, security. Vanessa's hearing came next. I sat behind Caleb, hands clasped, heart pounding. When she walked in wearing handcuffs, her face streaked with stress and sleeplessness, something inside me cracked. Not with sympathy, but with disbelief that someone I sheltered under my roof had chosen this path. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Caleb. She just stared at the floor as the charges were read. Her attorney tried to argue she was manipulated, pressured, unaware of the scale of the crime. But the evidence Caleb provided was overwhelming. Every fraudulent signature, every hidden transfer, every fake account, every email. Caleb had them all. The prosecutor laid the files out like a map of betrayal. When Caleb was called to testify, he rose slowly, shoulders straight, voice steady. I felt a strange combination of pride and heartbreak. He shouldn't have had to testify against his own mother, but he did it with dignity. He answered every question clearly, calmly. "Why did you come forward?" the prosecutor asked. Caleb paused, then said something I will never forget. "Because she wasn't just stealing money. She was stealing trust. From my grandmother. From families like ours. I couldn't let that continue." A soft murmur rolled through the courtroom. Vanessa's face crumpled. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. She lowered her head into her hands, shoulders shaking. By the end of the hearing, the judge announced bail was denied. That was the moment Vanessa truly realized there was no escape. No more running. No more lies. No more Adrian. The investigation expanded quickly. Within weeks, several elderly victims came forward. People who had been quietly losing their savings without understanding why. The state investigators uncovered forged signatures, manipulated financial documents, fake consulting fees, hidden offshore accounts, and altered pension withdrawal forms. The evidence piled higher than her attorney could fight. Sentencing day came, and Caleb insisted on accompanying me. The courtroom was full. Victims, reporters, company representatives, even financial crime experts. Everyone wanted to witness the outcome. The judge reviewed both cases. Adrian Price received 10 years in state prison. Vanessa Holloway received 8 years, along with restitution orders. The judge's words to her were sharp but fair. She had exploited trust, targeted vulnerable elders, and committed deliberate harm. Vanessa cried, really cried. But the consequences were already written. Caleb didn't gloat. He didn't even look relieved. He just looked tired. Outside the courtroom he asked quietly, "Grandma, did I do the right thing?" I wrapped my arms around him. "You did the brave thing," I whispered. "And sometimes bravery hurts." 6 months later, a letter arrived from the state's victim restitution program. They had completed the process. A check for $29,500 was issued to us, recovered funds from Adrian and Vanessa's seized accounts. Caleb and I sat at the dining table, staring at the envelope. I felt a deep, slow breath escape my chest. Not because of the money, but because justice had finally touched our home. And yet, the story didn't end there. Caleb wasn't done. He wasn't just a boy who exposed a crime. He was someone who had found a calling. He began building something new, something powerful. A community resource. A protection network. A mission. He dedicated himself to helping elderly families avoid the very trap we fell into. It wasn't revenge. It was prevention. Purpose. A new chapter for him. And for us. 6 quiet months passed after the sentencing, and life slowly began to feel steady again. The house wasn't heavy anymore. No tension in the hallways, no secrets humming beneath the surface. Caleb spent most evenings in his room, working on his computer, building something he told me would help people like us. I didn't fully understand it at first, but I saw the focus in his eyes, the same determination he had shown the night he uncovered everything. One morning, as I watered the small fern by the window, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I answered without thinking. There was a long pause, and then a voice I knew far too well. "Margaret, it's me." Vanessa. Her voice was thin, strained, tired, nothing like the sharp confidence she once carried. For a moment I said nothing. My fingers tightened around the phone. She took a shaky breath. I just wanted to talk. I don't know who else to call. I didn't let her finish. Quietly, calmly, I pulled the phone away from my ear and ended the call. No anger. No yelling. Just certainty. Some bonds, once shattered, never return to what they were. I set the phone down and walked toward Caleb's room. The door was half open, and inside he stood in front of a small group of elderly neighbors who had gathered around his desk. He was explaining how scammers create fake accounts, how to check for suspicious withdrawals, how to protect retirement savings from fraud. He spoke with confidence, with clarity, like someone who had lived through the fire and come out the other side carrying water for others. On the wall behind him, I noticed a new printed sign. Holloway Financial Defense Network. Protecting seniors. Restoring security. Preventing abuse. It made my throat tighten. This was no longer just my grandson. He had become a shield for others. A voice for people who didn't know they needed help. A protector shaped not by anger, but by purpose. He glanced back and saw me standing there. His face lit up with the warm, steady smile that had gotten me through the hardest months of my life. I smiled back, letting all the weight I had carried slowly fall away. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. Not because the danger was gone, but because my grandson had learned how to fight it. And in that small, sunlit room, listening to Caleb guide those elders with patience and strength, I understood something deeply. My story didn't end in betrayal. It ended in renewal. And Caleb, my boy, had become the protector of countless homes, not just mine.